Tournament time. Did I study at all for this? No. Did I play a cash game yesterday instead of studying? Maybe. No regrets so far. Probably later today when I have no idea how to maneuver a short stack or what to do with King 10 offsuit from middle position or...
Lots and lots to get through today, so we're gonna jump right in. First things first, yesterday was the tournament day, and I noticed at no point did I actually describe to you guys what tournament it was I'm playing in. So it's just a little rinky-dinky tournament at Lake Elsinore Casino. They do it every Sunday. The buy-in is $90. First place is around $3,000, and I think that's the extent of what I know. That actually ties nicely into my next point, which is I don't know shit about tournaments. That being said, I wanted to give you guys my 2 cents on what I think of them. Not sure if that's worth anything, but I've been asked a few times already, why don't I play more tournaments? And it's pretty simple. One, you need a much bigger bankroll simply because variance in tournaments is even higher than cash games. I think the best players only cash like 15% of the time. So that's the main reason. Secondly, I like to come and go whenever I want. In tournaments, obviously, you're bound to a schedule that they set for you. And if you're not in your seat when the cards are dealt, your hand is dead and you blind out. And lastly, as you guys know, I'm not a huge fan of short stacked poker, which in tournaments is pretty much inevitable. Anyway, moving on to the tournament, I'm gonna share every hand with you guys that I thought was important. Not to give anything away, but it's quite a few, and hopefully you guys enjoy this rapid fire style. So without any further ado, let's jump right in.
All right, so here we go. Cards are in the air. Everyone starts with 11,000 in their stack. Blinds are 2550, so everyone's good for 220 big blinds. Pretty early on, I get involved in a hand where there's 2 limpers, and I look down at ace 6 of hearts from middle position. I think all 3 options are fine here, but I decide to just over limp. Being that I'm fairly new to the table and just haven't really got settled yet, don't really know anything about my opponents, I decide to call. The cutoff calls as well, the small blind completes, and the big blind checks. The flop is definitely above average. Ace Jack 10 with 2 hearts, so we flop top pair and the nut flush draw. Action checks to me. I decide to bet 100 and get 2 or 3 callers. The turn is the 4 of diamonds, and action checks to me one more time. I put out a bet of 600, and only the early position player makes the call. The river's the 5 of clubs, so our hand does not improve. He checks it one more time, and I don't really see any value in betting. Not really sure what worse hand could call us, so I just check back, and he shows Jack 3 of diamonds. So happy to take down the first pot of the tournament. Moving on to level 2, blinds are 50, 100, and we have 13,000 in our stack. In this next hand, the under the gun player limps, which is my favorite play in Texas Hold'em. There's 2 more limpers, and when the action gets to the small blind, he makes it 800. Pretty great spot when I look down at pocket aces in the big blind. With my nipples slightly tingling, I put in a warm 3-ball to 2,400, and surprisingly, the under the gun limper calls. Action folds back to the small blind, and he makes the call, leaving himself with around 3,000 behind, and the under the gun player has pretty much a matching stack to ours. So 3 ways to a flop here, which comes pretty great for our pocket aces. It's 7-4-4 rainbow. Small blind checks it to me, and I think this is a good spot to down bet. Don't want to fold out any over pairs, and not really worried about any turn cards at this point. So I bet 2,100. The under the gun player makes the call, and the small blind folds. The turn is the 5 of clubs. At this point, I only have around 8,000 left in my stack, so I decide to move all in. He thinks it over for a while, but eventually decides on a call. We open our cards, and I'm a little surprised to see my opponent has pocket queens in this spot, but as expected, Our opponent has 2 outs, and luckily the river is a blank. So we win a pretty sizable pot here in level 2 and move forward with a more than double starting stack. Moving on to level 3, blinds are 100, 200. There's an early position limp, and I look down at King, Queen of Diamonds from the cutoff, make it 600, and get called by the button, small blind, and original limper. So 4 ways to a flop, which comes 5, 3, deuce with 2 diamonds. Action checks to me, and with very little showdown value, but a bunch of equity, I think it's best to continue here. So I put in a bet of 800 and get called by the small blind and early position player. Turn seems like one of the best in the deck. It's the 6 of diamonds, putting a 4-liner to a straight, but obviously giving us the second nut flush. I bet 1200 and get called by just the small blind this time. River's the 3 of clubs. He checks it one more time, and I think he only has around 5 or 6,000 at this point, so pretty easy shove, but unfortunately our opponent lets it go. Still happy to take it down and enjoy some run good here in the early levels. Next interesting hand comes from level 4, 100, 200 with a 25 ante, and we have around 25,000 in our stack. The player first to act puts in the limp. There's 4 more limpers, and I look down at ace, queen of clubs from the big blind. Looking to raise it up here, so I make it 1600. Unfortunately, the under the gun limper jams for 5,000 total, and everyone else folds. I think it's a close spot, especially considering this guy was pretty conservative, but with how much is out there, I don't think we need too much equity to make this the right call. So I put the chips in, and we get the bad news when he flips over pocket kings. So we're looking for some help here and don't have to wait long at all. First card in the window, ace of diamonds, and we managed to dodge the other kings in the deck. Nice to take this one down, especially considering that we were pretty far behind. Shortly after, still in level 4, the player on my right is first to act, and he limps in. I wouldn't normally think much of that, but this guy was pretty solid, so it looks a little suspicious. But when I look down at pocket jacks next to act, I'm just going to have to raise, and if he does the dreaded limp re-raise, I guess we'll just handle it when it comes to that. So I make it 1,000, the button makes the call, and as I somewhat suspected, the under the gun limper puts in the old limp re-raise, makes it 3,500 to go. We each started with 30,000 or more, so getting a pretty good price in position here. I'm happy to make the call and play some streets. The button folds, so we go heads up to a flop of king 7-3 rainbow. He checks it over to me. Nice try, bro. Check it back. The turn is the 6 of clubs. Here comes the delayed c-bet with an overpair or a set. 6,000, and I fire my cards into the muck like I'm allergic. Unfortunately, throughout level 5, we had to fold all our holdings, just didn't get anything playable, but eventually in level 6, we get into a pretty interesting spot. 300, 600 with a 75 ante. Under the gun player opens to 2,000 off of a 50,000 stack, and we call in early position with ace 10 of diamonds and around 25,000 in our stack. Everyone else folds, so we go heads up in position to a flop of jack, jack 4 with 2 diamonds. He continues for 2,000, and we make the call. The turn is the 10 of spades, and this time he checks it over to me. I think this is the point in the hand where I don't love my play. I think the correct play here is to just check back. Even though our hand seems pretty good, there's not really worse, I think, that can call us, aside from maybe like king, queen. But even against those hands, we're happy to give up a free river and potentially let him bluff. And also facing a check raise would be pretty nasty in this spot. However, I decided to bet small, made it 4,500. As soon as I put the bet out, I wasn't really in love with it, but luckily he lets it go and we take down a much needed pot. At this point, there's 49 players remaining of the 99 entrants, so around half the field is gone. Early into level 7, the action folds to us in the cutoff, and I look down at 9-6 of clubs. In an unopened pot, I'm not sure if this is a raise or a fold from the cutoff, but I just decided to raise and try to take down the blinds, who were pretty conservative players. But unfortunately, we get called by the button. So probably just gonna give it up here unless we flop some sort of equity, which we do. In fact, 100% it seems like. 10-8-7 with 2 spades. I decide to check it over to her, being that this flop should favor her range at least somewhat, I would imagine, but unfortunately she checks it back. The turn is the 10 of hearts, and now that the board is very connected, I decide to bet 2,000 and she makes the call. The river is a total break, the deuce of clubs. My instinct here is to check because I think the majority of her range will be missed draws, but I think that's more of a cash game mentality. People seem to bluff much less in tournaments, so I decide to just bet and target the part of her range that isn't draws, which I guess would just be medium strength pairs. I make it 5,000 and unfortunately she folds right away. But still, hard to complain about opening a shitty hand and flopping the nuts. As we head into level 8, we have around 30 big blinds left and 33 players remain. 10 players make the money, so it seems like we'll need a double up pretty soon to stay afloat. But unfortunately, we are card dead again for around 20 minutes. Getting a little scary, but deep into level 8, 500, 1000 with a 100 ante, we look down at ace 5 offsuit from middle position. I decide to open it up here and hopefully take down the blinds, but unfortunately get called by late position and big blind. Having decent removal to some strong hands, and considering that the players in the blinds were fairly tight, I thought this was a good play, but who knows? Like I said, didn't do much studying. Anyway, 3 ways to a flop of ace 4 deuce with 2 spades. I decide to check when the action checks to me because the player in late position seemed to really like taking stabs when he sensed weakness. So he bets 5,000, the big blind folds, and at this point I'd rather just end the hand. If he's got a better hand, so be it, but I check raise all in and he pretty quickly lets it go. So not really in love with that hand, but just telling you guys the story. Shortly after, still in level 8, we look down at pocket 8s from under the gun, open it up to 2,500 with around 35,000 in our stack. There's 2 callers and the button jams all in for 55,000. Action gets back to us, and again, this is a spot where doing some studying would have helped a lot. I'm not really sure what we're supposed to do here, but I decide to just fold, even though we could very likely have the best hand. But, you know, I started thinking if I get eliminated now, this vlog's going to be really anticlimactic. So it's pretty much you guys' fault that I folded there. As we enter level 9, which is 1,000, 2,000 with a 200 ante, we have 19 big blinds. Chip down to 17 big blinds when we get dealt ace 10 of spades. There's a limper first to act. I shove all in, and luckily we take it down, so that always helps. But sadly, it's back to card death for us. Try to stay patient, and eventually that pays off when we look down at pocket queens on the button. The action's unopened, so when I min raise here, it's going to look like I'm just trying to steal the blinds. Pretty good spot to actually have a hand. The small blind folds, and the big blind jams his entire stack in, which was 17,000. We make the easy call, and we're up against king 9 offsuit. The board comes out jack 9-5 with 2 spades. Happy not to see a king, obviously, but unfortunately the turn is the 9 of spades. The river is the 8 of spades, so a very temporary heart attack for me, and we survive, chip up to 57,000. Later on, we enter level 10, which is 1,500, 3,000 with a 300 ante. I open ace 10 offsuit from middle position to 8,000 and get called by the big blind, who was the tournament chip leader at the time. The flop comes 10-8-7 with 2 clubs and 1 diamond. He checks it to me. Not really a pot where I want to get fancy at all, so I c-bet 11,000 and he makes the fold. Not really that eventful, but when you're this short on chips and the blinds are going up crazy fast, opening and taking it down on the flop is plenty fine by me. Now we're at level 11, 2,000, 4,000, 500 ante. We look down at pocket queens. Red queens from middle position, open it up, and the big blind doesn't waste any time in jamming all in. Dealer counts out 17,000. Certainly doesn't matter with a hand this strong. I make the call, and we're up against 2 red 5s. At first glance, pretty scary board, but after we all look it over for a little bit, we do in fact have the best hand. At this point, we have 123,000 chips, which sounds like a lot, but 30 big blinds, that's all it is. 14 people left, which is just 2 tables. And something I noticed was our table had most of the chips in play, probably like 70 or 75%, while the other table was all the short stacks. Being a tournament rookie, I'm not really sure if this is good or bad. Just something I noticed. If anyone has insight on that, I'm curious to see what to make of that. Anyway, the players at the other table walk over to our table and ask us if we want to chop. At this point, we would each make $580. No one answers at my table, so it's pretty clear where the competitive players are sitting. I don't really have a preference either way, but I'm sure if I was a tournament grinder, I'd probably be inclined to play it till the end and try to maximize any edge I could have over the field. Moving on to level 12, 3,000, 6,000 with a 500 ante. There's an under the gun open to 12,000, and we look down at pocket kings in middle position. With around 18 bigs, I wasn't really sure what the best play was. Maybe a small 3-bet and then jam the flop, or maybe just get it all in right here. The second option sounded like it couldn't really be wrong, whereas the first option sounded like it could lead to some problems. So I just decided to go all in. Folds back to him, and he goes into the tank for quite a long time, thinks it over, asks for a count, but eventually lets it go. So maybe we missed some value, or maybe he just didn't have a hand he could call off with. Not really sure there, but still happy to take it down. At this point, the bubble officially bursts. Only 10 players left, and what remains of our table gets moved to the other table, which is now the final table. So pretty excited to have made the final table of my first tournament. Even though it's a small, pretty insignificant one, I did not expect to make it this far at all. So I'm just happy to make it this far for the vlog, to be honest. 10 players left, final table, let's do this. Luck would have it, we draw for the button, and yours truly gets the very first big blind, which is like 1/10 of my stack now. I think we have 130,000 at this point. Early position opens to 20,000 from a 100,000 stack. The small blind calls, leaving himself 50,000 behind, which I thought was a little weird. And I look down at pocket jacks from the big blind. Pretty easy jam all in, so that's what I do. The early position player tanks and folds, so that's nice because he could certainly have over pairs. But we're just going to have to get it all in and hope that we're ahead. The small blind shows pocket 9s after thinking it over and lets it go. So a little bit strange of him to commit such a big chunk of a stack and then fold. Still at level 14, action folds to us on the button, and we look down at ace deuce offsuit. I think any hand containing an ace should be a raise from the button in an unopened pot, so I make it 20,000. The small blind folds, and the big blind jams his short stack, which was around 55 or 60,000. This is a pretty competent player who I think is very aware of the dynamic between button and blinds. So pretty clear call. Unfortunately, this time he actually woke up with a hand, and we end up losing to 4 kings. So ace high is not going to take it down this time. 4 kings are good. Nice hand, bro. I almost had you. Next, I get into a little bit of a tricky spot here at the end of level 14. Blinds are still 5,000, 10,000 with a 1,000 ante. It folds all the way to the small blind, who shoves for 56,000, so 5 big blinds, and I look down at ace 7 of clubs from the big blind. Not really sure what the correct play is here. I feel like he could be doing this with a lot of small pocket pairs, king queen, king jack, king 10, or maybe even some other garbage just trying to steal the big blind. But he could obviously have much better hands, and we could be drawing to 3 outs. So after thinking about it for a while, I decide to let it go, and the small blind shows us pocket queens, so got away from it there. At this point, we steal a few blinds and get down to 4-handed play. Final 4 of the 99. The average stack is 270,000, which sadly is just 9 big blinds. And here's the table lineup for you guys. Seat number 1 is the chip leader with $500,000 in chips. Seat number 2 is a nice woman who is begging him to chop, but the chip leader will have none of it. She has 150,000. Seat 3 is an older gentleman with 90,000, and seat 4 is your protagonist with 340,000. So 2 short stacks. I guess I'm somewhat healthy, and there is a big stack, but not by much. Pretty great dynamic, actually. It was a really fun final table. We were all having fun, talking, laughing, and that's definitely the type of poker I enjoy. Level 15 comes around and the blinds are just massive. Everyone's putting in half their stack every hand. In this next hand, the big stack opens from under the gun, which is also the cutoff, to 60,000. Folds to us in the big blind, and when I look down at King Jack offsuit, I think it's a very clear shove. This player was very aggressive, had been opening almost all hands, and is just trying to get that first place money. So King Jack obviously will be behind some percentage of the time, but for the most part, considering this player's entire range, should be plenty good. I send it in 340,000. He doesn't think for too long and calls. We open our hands and actually are in much better shape than expected. Our opponent shows King 10 offsuit. So we're in great shape to take the chip lead here. The board runs out, all low cards, and the turn is a 10. No help on the river, and just like that, we're out in 4th place. All right, so that's it. As you guys saw, out in 4th place, pretty heartbreaking fashion. King Jack versus King 10. Spiked a 10 on the turn, and unfortunately it was the only bigger stack at the table. Honestly, just glad I even made it this far to begin with, especially considering that it's my first tournament and I haven't done any studying whatsoever. In for $90 and out for, I think it was like 600. I'm honestly so tired, I didn't even check to see. That's such a rookie mistake. I didn't check to see the payout. I just grabbed the cash and left. But thank you guys for tagging along. Hopefully you enjoyed this vlog. I'm still a cash game player. Don't get it mixed up. I definitely prefer cash, but nice to dip my feet in the water and bring you guys along for the ride. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
All right, so that's a wrap. A little bit bittersweet. Now, having slept on it, I'm just wondering what would have happened if King Jack had held versus King 10 there. I'm hoping I don't have the tournament bug, but who knows? Maybe in the future we'll get another shot. Anyway, that's gonna wrap up this episode. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for the support, and thank you for liking the video if you did. It helps the channel grow and it really helps me out. I know there was probably, actually definitely no educational value in this one, but maybe the entertainment was there? Who knows? But that's it for this one, guys. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.